Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another great episode of The Human Role. So, today we are going to take a deep dive into 401k and just the importance in the evolving world of 401k that we're engulfed in right now. Luckily, I was able to get a very special, very qualified guest, Marc Fowler. He is the Director of Retirement Education at Human Interest. Marc comes with heavy credentials. So, we're talking about he's a qualified 401k specialist. He's an accredited investment fiduciary, the top person to talk about this topic as we dive into small businesses and really just let our HR and payroll people know how important it is to incorporate this within your program. So, Marc, thank you so much for joining today. Really excited to have you. I'd love for you just to give, some details on your background for anyone in my network who's not familiar, not only with you, but also with Human Interest, because I know you guys are one of the fastest growing 401k providers right now. So I'd love to kind of take a deep dive into that as well.
I've always been in essentially the service of people in some way of education, those sorts of things. I started my own businesses in New York back in 2009, two small businesses that I started up. And I loved that. And taking care of the team that I was working with was always a priority with that. Unfortunately, I went through a divorce and we had to separate the businesses. So then I moved into sort of mainstream corporate America, where I've really focused on startups and sort of innovative companies that are really designed to help people achieve their goals. WeWork was changing the way the world went to work. I worked at another company that was democratizing AI. And now at Human Interest, what we're doing here is essentially making sure that everybody gets the opportunity to meet retirement on their own terms with dignity and with confidence. And that's what we're really about. So you asked, who is Human Interest? We are essentially, we could probably get away with saying the fastest growing 401k in the US. Last year, we estimate we launched about 1 in 4 of every new startup 401ks across the country. And we're looking to dramatically exceed that this year. And really, the reason behind all of this is the introduction of technology. It doesn't need to be as complicated and as expensive as people perceive a 401k or a 403 should be. It can be much easier than that. And it can really be an empowerment to a business rather than just an expense. And that's what we're bringing into the market, is the ability for everyone, every organization, whether you're just a one-person startup or a multi-thousand person organization, your employees they work hard, they deserve the right to be able to secure their future. That's what we go to work for, right?
I agree. I've heard amazing things about Human Interest and just your growth. But as you were alluding to, really wanted to get your opinion on why you think that this is really the moment, right, for small and mid-sized businesses to take retirement benefits more seriously. I think you've already started that process where it's like, look, in my opinion, I have said in different episodes too, is that this is now like an employee market versus an employer market.
Yeah.
And we're definitely experiencing unprecedented times. And so I think the more benefits we can offer for employees and also educating them on the importance of retirement is one thing. But I love to kind of just hear your thoughts there as well.
I think one of the important things is to, before we talk about this moment, we need to look at just a couple of the moments leading up to this, right? That if you looked at the statistics, if you worked at a big organization, a 500 person plus, you would expect there to be retirement benefits just as a sort of standard part of the package. But as you get into those smaller organizations, the 100 pluses, the 50 pluses, etc., or even the 50 and less, the expectation isn't always there. In fact, if you're less than 50 employees as an organization, statistically it says less than half the time those businesses even offer any kind of retirement package. And what that means is that a large chunk, almost half, or maybe even more than half of working Americans aren't in connection with a employer-sponsored retirement plan. And why that matters is the AARP says, hey, if people don't connect through their employer, they are dramatically less likely to save for retirement. People don't go walk down the street, find their local bank, and start a retirement plan in comparison to people doing it through their employer. That was the context that existed for so long in the US. And what we've seen then is a need to meet that gap in the small and medium business sector. What's happened there is, first of all, the sort of legacy industry hasn't moved to meet that challenge. So we've seen technologically forward providers begin to inhabit that space. They're thinking, how can we leverage technology to make it a seriously efficient, affordable product that can come in and meet the challenges of small and medium businesses? So there's one part. That the technology that you're seeing in day-to-day banking, et cetera, is actually coming into the retirement industry. The next part to kind of put alongside that is the federal government and local state governments are realizing if they don't take steps to meet those challenges, they're going to have waves of retirees come through who cannot afford to retire. And that has dramatic knock-on effects for employers, for the economy, both on a sort of state level and federal level. So what you see is a sort of stick and carrot approach. The carrot comes from the federal government offering pretty significant tax incentives for small and medium businesses to get a plan up and running. And you're also seeing on the stick side, a lot of states, we're up to 14 right now, have active what they call state mandate programs that say, hey, if you have a threshold of employees that operate in our state, that employer, no matter where they're headquartered, is required to offer those employees a retirement benefit. So, you've got this change of the landscape with the technology. You've got the federal government trying to encourage people forwards. You've got the state governments trying to push people forwards. And I think the overall effect of that is a landscape that's now tilted to make or encourage small and medium businesses to get started. So that's on the legislative product side. What we're also seeing, my team in general, what we do is we work with the live enrollment meetings. So when a company gets started on our platform, we actually work with their employees so they understand the complexities. Let's put it that way. The complexities or the functional elements of a 401k. And when they do that, they ask us a lot of questions. And the things that we are seeing is people asking about what kind of investments are in their plan? Where can they get financial advice? That's not something we can give them, but they still ask us, where can we get our financial advice? How can we consolidate accounts through rollovers? So there is a lot more targeted financial demand to understand their financial picture. So you have employees wanting more, you have technology able to give more, and you have governments, both on federal and state level, taking steps to encourage more to happen. And then you take your business owner or your HR professional and drop them in the middle of that, and it's a very active landscape. The financial incentives alone are enough to get things moving. But I think as HR professionals, you're sat there and you're trying to meet the needs of the employee team that you have around you. And I think as you listen to them, certainly what we've found is that the questions are getting stronger and more targeted around financial wellness, financial stability. And that's where the 401k is such a big support.
One part that I want to kind of get some more insight on is, of course, like the cost for any HR person who is essentially trying to implement this, start this up, or even present this, right? If you're a small business, you're trying to present it to your C-suite executives. That's really a tough pill to swallow, especially in this stage that we're in right now. So curious also, like, any type of like strategies that you think from, an HR person's role that would help them with these complexities, but also help them get over that barrier? Because then also there's a system update, right? And we're already swamped with our day to day. And it's like, how much of a burden is this going to add on to my plate? What is your feedback there, suggestions, or helpful tips for them?
Wow, there's a lot to unpack in that question. Let's start with, if you're going to present this kind of thing upwards, those folks have usually been around 10, 15, 20 years. And if you've been in even benefits adjacent space, the preconception around retirement benefits is that they are administratively burdensome, that it takes a specialist team to get a good retirement plan off the ground. That, for one, is not true anymore, right? And we'll talk about why that's not true. But associated with that is people feel then it's also going to cost a lot of money. We've already talked about the fact that the federal government, particularly if you're below a 50 employee threshold, will throw a lot of tax incentives to the point where you could almost start a plan for free for the first 3 years. We are significant tax benefits on that, or tax credits is what I should probably say. So that already offsets the cost. But as we talked about, technology breeds efficiency, efficiency breeds affordability. And so even if you took out the federal incentives, the cost of a 401k can actually be a very affordable, stable, with business owners, they always worry about, and I as a reformed business owner myself, cash flow was everything. It can now be that you can understand the predictable cost of a 401k without any hidden fees, right? Which is something, if you've been in the HR space and you've worked with benefits, or certainly retirement benefits up till now, you can get these sudden sort of $500 hits for something you weren't expecting. I feel like that day is gone. We can actually now just do a stable sort of pricing structure, completely transparent. So that's helpful. But also then on the administrative side, coming back to the HR world, the other element that typically comes with this is people are concerned with the activity, administration, and compliance component that comes with a retirement plan. And again, there are providers now, I can think of one in particular, that will actually offer to take the vast majority of those compliance related tasks, the admin related tasks, and put them on themselves rather than the HR professional who, particularly at a small business, may not be a benefit specialist. And so they can continue doing the things they're good at and let a team of specialists run the 401k for them. Coming back to, I think you said, what are some of the strategies behind getting these off to a good start? Again, my team gets to work with pretty much all the incoming retirement plans into human interest. And we have a lot of them. I'll put it that way. So what we get to see is what works and what doesn't. One of the key things is the content of the message is, hey, we've got a 401k, but the way it's delivered to your employees matters a lot. For instance, if you were to introduce, I don't know, like pet insurance, you can just roll that out and say, hey, everyone, we now have pet insurance.
Yes.
And everyone's like, great. A 401k needs a bit more of a deft hand, or in fact, any retirement plan needs a bit more of a deft hand, because for those folks who have not had a 401k or any kind of retirement plan before, when you introduce it, if they don't know what's happening, all they see is a reduction in their ability to afford the rent, the mortgage, put their kids through school, pay for the car or whatever it is. They just see that paycheck take a squeeze. And so one of the things that's so important is how you spend time with your employees before the plan starts. So you're talking them through, what does it mean? What is a 401k? When you see a little bit of your paycheck go out, what's that really about? Does the company have a match? Do they understand why that's such a benefit for them? particularly those folks who haven't had retirement benefits before. And if you do that and then involve them in the enrollment process that so many providers have, you can actually have them connect and feel empowered by the platform, by the benefit, rather than sort of having it disappear a little bit of that valued paycheck that they have. That's why we go to work, is to afford our life outside of work. And so if you don't position it right, they just see a decrease in their ability to afford that life. And that is something we need to handle beforehand.
Absolutely. I definitely wanted to also pivot. So you nailed it. 'Cause I wanted to pivot to the employee piece as well on how HR can even communicate to their employees. Because to your point, employees really just see this is going to take more money out of my account. And, we're all trying to survive right now. Sometimes they don't think it's worth it. They think it's, some conspiracy. I mean, we hear everything from the HR stance, right? So we try to do good, and then sometimes people take it the other way. So I think it's good, especially if there's an employer contribution too. A lot of times they just don't understand that. And I think as an HR executive too, just sitting and talking with the employees, helping with that communication. And I like what Mark also said was helping them through the system so that they're just not overindulging, or they don't do too much or don't do too less, and really just having that open door policy where you're being transparent and where they understand everything full scope from start to middle to finish always goes a long way within the culture and the population.
And on that, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go in and explain investment funds and all that kind of thing. Keep it high level, keep it so that people can actually jump in and understand, hey, when I see a percentage of my paycheck, what does that mean? Is there an employer match? The basic mechanics. That's also what we do for enrollment meetings, is help people through those mechanics. If nothing else, just to brief folks that this is going to happen, that there will be an enrollment meeting, get the participants into that enrollment meeting, and you will have a good outcome.
There's been a lot of talk, at least in my network of friends, as far as like culture as well, and trying to offer benefits, but trying to, still somehow save money and not go over budgets at the same time. So you touch base on all that. But 401k is obviously a competitive advantage when it comes to benefits. But do you also think that this can shape the culture, retention, total reward strategy in general? Those are layers that people kind of like overlook. And sometimes you may not think your company is doing enough until you experience another company and then realize that too. So curious on what your thoughts on there, on how it can also just help shape the culture and keep retention as high as possible.
Even for the folks who aren't in one of those two categories of being at risk of leaving or you're trying to attract in, the 401k has enormous benefits because it is actually, a great way of helping folks reduce that financial stress. And as HR pros, I'm sure I'm sure you and so many of your listeners have been inundated with the stats around stress and the effect on productivity. So we'll stipulate that stress equals a decrease in productivity, right? Everyone, I think, understands that. By helping people secure a long-term financial future, you're starting to decrease that stress a little bit. And therefore, just for the rank and file employee, you're really beginning to move up the productivity. Beyond that, we've seen the fact that there is a significant retentive benefit of a 401k. Gusto released a study where they estimated just in the first year, if you have a 401k in place, just for that first year turnover, you could see a reduction of 40%. They estimate a reduction across all times of the business of around 32%. Just put like the architecture in place to try and hire someone. Society of Human Resource Management says that's like $4,500. Just
Yes.
that one piece.
Yeah.
Not to mention, opportunity cost and all those other things, training, onboarding, et cetera, et cetera. So that alone is probably more than you will pay for your 401k, right? Just a little bit,
Yeah.
depending on obviously the size of the business. And so it has that retentive benefit. Also, we're beginning to see, I think you said it right at the top of this, that it's an employee market. as an employer, as an HR professional with the job postings, etc., you are having to compete in a way we haven't seen for a long, long time against other employers. So, what helps you stand out? And also, what kind of employee are you trying to bring in? You're probably trying to bring in somebody who's quite smart, quite intuitive, quite aware of what they're looking for, what helps them work effectively. Those kind of employees are looking for a certain benefit set, of which a retirement benefit is, you go through, we did a roadblocks, our own study. We had right behind health insurance was a retirement benefit as the most requested
Oh, wow.
benefit. Depending on which studies you look at, it's either tied or above paid leave. Think about that, right? Time off from work, a retirement benefit is at least tied in some studies above that. And it's just a nudge beneath health insurance, which is essentially a must have. And it's somewhere in the 80% of people asking for it, which in my mind, the way my brain works, I'm there going, well, the other 19%, are they independently wealthy? Do they not have to worry about retirement? In my mind, it should be 100%. But hey, I'm a hammer and all I see is nails, right? And so having the ability in that crowded marketplace to go, hey, look, here's a 401k. Look at this shiny 401k is a great start. The ability to put an employer match next to that in the job posting, that's a bit special, right? Because employees now or potential employees are aware of what that means.
Yeah.
That's essentially, sort of tax advantaged extra money that the employer is offering them. And it also, as you come back to the culture, speaks to the culture of the organization. That company has said, hey, from the very beginning, we are interested in helping you secure your future. I don't know much, but I know that that speaks to a pretty strong culture.
Yes, offering this and helping them for their future goes a long way, right? It shows that you care. But then your mention of the cost of turnover and replacing an employee, and maybe it was an employee that just wanted a 401k plan. I mean, the cost of going through the job posting, the time that people spend interviewing, you're talking about a 12 to 18-month learning curve, just depending on the role. That within itself, if you do that comparison versus offering that, I want to really highlight that part because I had not thought, I mean, I know turnover is insane, but I had not thought that using that as a talking point, right? When we're trying to get through the door with the CFO or CEO, right? Just the importance of this, surveying your population too, you guys, where it's like, hey, look, just getting an idea of how many people actually want this and how that will help, change their perspective of the company will definitely work wonders. Lots of really good key points there and feedback. And we are dealing with all generations in the workforce, right? And the younger generations, they want full transparency. They want it all. So let's not hold back from them.
I will throw that there was a BlackRock study that came out and said Gen Z are more educated on retirement benefits, are putting away more money than any other generation has at the same level, saving more often and saving more. So if you want that kind of employee into your organization, you've got to meet them where they are.
Yeah, we've got to figure out how to understand them as well, right? And just not go off of like what we're used to with our
Yeah.
generations, versus them as well. So all good stuff. Okay, so let's get into, if you can, I love to hear, a share of like a client testimonial from the human interest side. Like if you had someone who was kind of like not really on board and how it maybe helped change and build their internal structure in any way. Love to kind of just hear something along those lines.
Fortunately, we see a lot of pretty satisfied folks, but what's interesting typically is the stories that bring them to us. I'll start with a CPA firm. If they're listening, I apologize if I mess up this first name, right? But it's Shriver, Carmona and Company,
Nice.
right? Shout out to them. And they essentially, what they wanted to do is they wanted to have a 401k, as you had rightly said, for the retentive and loyalty benefits, right? And so they were working as a PEO. And so they had brought in Guideline, which is, another competitor out there in the market, because of the technological integration with their payroll platform of Gusto. It all looks great on paper, but the CEO Derek Schreiber would often check in with Guideline for support and have questions about how it operates, questions about how to tweak the employee census, those sorts of questions, standard sort of HR things. And his challenge was it was always essentially a 1-800 phone number to get that support. So that was never a great experience. And so what they wanted was somebody that could have a really high quality integration, because a lot of providers say they have integrations. Not all integrations are created equal, right?
True.
I'll just put that over there. Not all integrations are created equal.
Another episode.
Yeah, I want to like. If you want me to fully geek out, get me on the integrations.
Okay.
Right? So I'll just put that over there for now, and I'll push the spectacles back up my nose. But also with that quality integration, he wanted the ability to be able to get support rapidly and in a quality fashion. And so they transitioned over to human interest. And I'll quote him here directly. Is that all I had to do was get in contact with Guideline and sign a few forms. And that was the extent of the transition. Human interest just basically ran it from there. And that is the first sign of being on a human interest plan, is that we take your support incredibly seriously. We have a 250 person customer support team in Utah specifically for that. And we're now beginning to see the deep benefits of that as we get awards left and right, Dalbar Awards, Stevie Awards for customer service, those sorts of things. And that's the experience that he always wanted when working with a 401k. And nothing against Guideline. That typically has been the industry standard. What we're doing is saying it doesn't have to be. You expect better in every line of your life. Why is your long-term retirement future something different? And so Derek's come back and said, look, it has saved me huge amounts of time, or significant amounts of time, if I'm being fair to the words he used. And he no longer needs to manually provide payroll or census data, because all of that, because Gusto is one of those folks that we actually have, I believe last count, 520 something payroll integrations. Gusto is one of those 500 and something, and it's a very quality integration. And so all of that just happens essentially automatically in the background. And then Derek gets to get on with his real job, because he didn't get into being a CEO to manage the retirement benefit. That's a similar story that we hear time and time again. We hear another one I'll throw out is Ellis Hospitality. They operate 6 individually franchised hotels here in California. And if you know anything about California, it is state mandate crazy over here. At the end of this year, they're going to say, if you have any employees in this great state of California, and I'm in California, that's, so I'm a little biased, the great state of California, you need to connect them with a retirement benefit. And there is the Cal Savers program. And so Ellis Hospitality had been working, or had been considering the state mandate program. And they have a really great payroll system with Heartland that they just wanted it to be flawless and easy. They didn't want to have to manage this thing and babysit this thing and put hours and hours in. And so they didn't go with the mandated platform, the state-sponsored IRA program. They joined Human Interest. So all of that, again, we partner really well with Heartland. It's one of our myriad of integrations. And so all of that hassle that they were anticipating with the California program essentially melted away again. And, in addition to that, though, the VP of operations loves the clarity and the ease of the reporting dashboards, and gets to see, how are my employees actually engaging with the platform? What are my stats? How are they doing? What's the average deferral percentage? What's the participation rate? The things that if you're in HR, you care about those things. right? You didn't walk in and put this benefit in place for 3 people out of 100 to use it. You put it in place so that the biggest amount of the population possible can actually start saving for their retirement. And that is what it's all about.
Absolutely. I mean, talk about cost, retention, even your mention of how quick it was for the CEO. And from there, what came to my mind was just either saving himself and his team time to not have to go through things, manually themselves, but then also potentially not having to hire a whole person for just one specific role, and just making sure people can work different, separate, maybe have one or two roles all in one, but be able to use automation and not have to focus on spot checking every single thing, right? I mean, that works wonders because I do remember when I used to have to do manual entries until moving to automation, it is a nightmare at times.
And I'll throw this on, right? If you do have that person who's not the specialist and is checking in on the plan and they have a question, how quickly do you want that person to be able to get their question answered? We take great pride in the fact that if you call us, we'll pick up the phone in under 2 minutes. So in under 2 minutes, you're beginning to get your question answered. Or if you're one of those email people who like, because me personally talking on the phone sometimes feels weird now in this sort of text heavy environment. Actually call a human being, that doesn't feel right. If you email us, you're going to get a reply back in 4 hours. So it's not one business day, it's 4 hours. If we don't meet those sorts of standards, we're going to put money back in your pocket. And that is what we believe the experience of interacting with the person who is sort of looking after your retirement money. That's what it should feel like. Why should it feel anything else than that? You get better service, when you call in and buy a pair of shoes than you do with, your multi-million-dollar retirement plan. No. That does not equate. That's what we're trying to change.
It's a win-win, you guys. So definitely be sure to connect with Mark and also Human Interest as well. Send him messages because this is going to go a long way and it's really important, right? We really need, I think at this point, I wish I had known a lot more information when I was younger, started off in my career, versus now, right? I mean, in hindsight's 2020. So I think definitely a really important and timely topic as we are in open enrollment season. But last but not least, Mark, I wanted to get your thoughts on the future. So, QKS, AIF credentials, right? You're the main person to ask. How do you foresee 401k through small businesses kind of thriving and growing or potentially even adjusting over the next 5 to 10 plus years?
The trend we've seen on legislation driving impact for small and medium businesses. We talked about the tax incentives. We talked about the state mandates. That trend of moving things forward, I think, is going to continue, right? The question mark over Social Security, I think, puts a stronger stronger emphasis on individual savings ability because you don't know exactly how Social Security is going to look in 15, 20 years. So as you're facing that future, you want to have that bulwark against the variability of Social Security. So that's one piece. And I think that's going to keep moving forwards. What you might start to see is the sort of patchwork effect of states requiring retirement mandates could become a bit more federally cohesive. So there might be a move towards a blanket requirement for employers to start offering retirement benefits. That could be something that there have been whispers in corners in Capitol buildings about those sorts of things, but nothing's materialized. But that could be something. I think on the industry level, we might start to see a little bit of consolidation. As the payroll industry goes, to an extent, so does the 401k industry, because some of the big players do payroll and 401k, and you see a little bit of the consolidation of some of those. So maybe we could see that. But I think the main drive is, if we were to paint this with a really broad brushstroke, more people saving more earlier. right? I think that is going to be the drive. You go on to Instagram, you go on to TikTok, etc. You see people talking about finances. Whether you listen to those voices or not is a whole different conversation, but there is more noise around your financial situation than I think I've ever heard before. And so, with that, as a HR professional, you are going to be receiving more and more questions around financial issues. So, how are you going to meet those questions, those challenges? How are you going to help folks? We talked about that stress level. Financial stress is a big, big one. Retirement study says 51% of employees believe the company should offer some kind of financial education. And I think that's going to keep ticking up. We're seeing the growth of financial education benefits alongside retirement, alongside some of the other kinds of financial benefits that student loan help, etc. The financial education piece, that's one that we're seeing growing as well. That's something, if I was an HR professional, I would really ask questions about how can we support our employees with that, because if you can help them reduce that financial stress, their productivity, we talked about it, will start to come back up, and you'll start to have a confident, valued, inspired work team again.
Yeah, I was going to say all great things coming for the future, the potential of what's to come. And then to your point, payroll, from my payroll peeps out there, like payroll is also evolving and trying to figure things out, heavy automation. And Mark's correct, where the 401k deductions and the compliance piece and that tracking, especially when audits come around at the end of the year, all are going to intertwine together. But Mark, this is great, very insightful, very helpful. Really appreciate your expertise here, because you even triggered a couple things in my mind that I, had not thought of either. So really great, you guys. As I have said several times already, be sure to connect with Mark. He'll be attached to this post, and then check out Human Interest. If it sparks your interest, check it out. If it doesn't, still check it out, because it's important. Your employees will be interested, and him and his team, as you mentioned, you heard him mention, can definitely take the lead and get you all where you need to go and answer all your questions and concerns, potentially concerns, which are probably misconceptions for the most part at this point from what we've kind of gone through. So, Mark, looking forward to maybe the future, but also a potential follow-up episode. I know we already kind of threw one out there, so I'll connect with you again after this down the line, but really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the honor and privilege of being a part of this. And again, to anyone who wants to come find me, I'm not hiding on LinkedIn. Come find me. Oh, this side. Here we go. Marc Fowler on LinkedIn. Connect with me. Even if you don't want a retirement benefit, I'd love to chat with you about anything that's on your mind. I'm very interested in the world around me. So come chat. Love to hear from you.
Love it. All right, you guys. So I will see you in another few weeks with another great episode. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.